So of course Ben Shapiro is quite the doofus, and we all are aware currently that Ben Shapiro is really all about AOC and Bernie Sanders. And so this video we're going to be looking at is literally titled Shapiro Wrecks Democrat Leaders on Socialism. And this is just going to be rife with a bunch of really inconsistencies in semantics and the terminology that's being used, and I'll explain what that means in a second. But basically, he's going to go after socialism and go after specifically Bernie Sanders and AOC for being socialist, and he's just going to mumbo jumbo a bunch of nonsense. So let's first check out this first clip here.
Because we live in a time where people are disconnected from the actual impacts of socialism, very few people in the United States have ever lived under socialism, and all of them are expatriates from socialist dictatorships, essentially. It's very easy to re-embrace bad ideas because nobody ever sees the price tag. One of the beautiful things about being Bernie Sanders and being a socialist in general in the United States is you get to point to programs in other countries and say, we ought to do that. And then when people ask, how do you pay for that? You go, it'll pay for itself, which is the same thing you hear in timeshare presentations, and it is not true. And whenever somebody says, you know what, forget about the price tag, it's going to pay for itself, check your wallet, because I'm sure it is gone, and somebody is already buying stolen VCRs from the back of a truck with it. Okay, that is the way socialism tends to work. Well, it's not just Bernie Sanders embracing this stuff, it is the mayor of New York. So Bill de Blasio tweeted out over the weekend, brothers and sisters, there is plenty of money in this country. There's plenty of money in this world. It's just in the wrong hands. Yes, I would like all the money to be in the hands of a man who has never done anything for his entire life, Bill de Blasio. I also love the brothers and sisters. Kameraden! Comrades! If we are this far from an omelet, all we have to do is break a few eggs. Got to get rid of the kulaks. They have all the money. Once we take the money, it'll be all better.
And so already you end up seeing what I mean by inconsistency of semantics as well as terminology, because as you guys are all, very aware, Bernie Sanders is not a socialist. Bernie Sanders is a social democrat, which could not be further from socialism. Socialism is the, owning of the means of production. So what that means is, all you have are worker co-ops. You basically don't have the traditional capitalist hierarchy anymore, the hierarchical, you have the CEO making a bunch of bucks and calling all the shots, and then there's the workers at the bottom making nothing and, basically slaving away at work and making basically nothing. That's essentially what socialism is. Now, what Bernie Sanders is advocating for is not a post-capitalist, let's have a, destruction of the capitalist system, and then turn into Catalonia, Spain, or, any other democratic. So, well, that was anarchist. But anyways, the point being is that isn't what Bernie Sanders is. And so then he says, he claims that it's going to pay for itself. No, that's not what he says. He's actually provided quite, detailed responses as to how these different policy positions are going to be paid for. So, for example, when we're talking about Medicare for All, which is his marquee hallmark position that he holds, policy position that he touts and holds, Medicare for All is actually going to save us money. So a fiscal concern, and this is something I went over yesterday when I made the video about Doofus Tim Pool, is that if you're a fiscal conservative and you look at the numbers of, holy smokes, we pay a lot more as a percentage of our GDP for healthcare and get worse outcomes, how would the response as a fiscal conservative be that we need to either maintain this system or move even further towards a free market system, which is the opposite of what all the other countries which spend a lower percentage of GDP on healthcare and have better outcomes? How would that possibly be the response? So, as we've seen from the study from the Mercatus Institute, which is Koch funded, we would save $2 trillion over 10 years. So this is how it works. You shift, because right now there's public, expenditures on healthcare as well as private expenditures on healthcare. So what ends up happening is the government ends up taking the brunt of the cost. There will be a little bit left in private expenditures because there will be people who opt to, in addition to having their, Medicare card, they also get supplemental insurance. But for the most part, the vast majority of it will be public expenditure. So what that means is, you'll raise taxes, but you'll be saving money overall because it'll be cheaper, because obviously overhead costs of Medicare, I think is low as 2%, while, private hospitals are much higher. And Bernie Sanders said that his study showed that basically the average family would save 5 Gs. And it's ridiculous when people think that, oh, you're just going to raise taxes, so it's going to make the point moot. It's like, no, they're going to raise taxes because that'll fund the Medicare for All, which will be cheaper than what you're paying right now. You won't be paying any premiums anymore, and you'll be saving money if you get taxed. So just because there's a tax being levied doesn't mean that you're not benefiting because it's being offset by not having to pay any premiums. So, it's just extremely odd situation there. So how could you possibly be a fiscal conservative and not support that? Then we have free college, which is another one that people are considered like, you loony liberals, how are you going to pay for that? Free college is a joke, dude. It costs like $80 billion a year, $60 to $80 billion a year. That's it. Every time we do military budget increases, which happen like every year, I always see them. And the most recent one had raised it, I believe it was like 70 billion or something like that for every year. So that's about 700 billion over 10 years. If we were to just reroute those funds to free college, you just funded it like that, just like that. And that has actual benefits to our society and I don't know why we're allergic to using tax dollars to fund things that help our own people. Because you are to free up the burden. We'd cancel all student loan debt as well. You'd free up the burden of other people who can now start consuming more in the economy as well as paying more taxes because, they're making more money because people who wouldn't have gone to college because it was too expensive would now go and have higher jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And we just benefit as a nation when people have more education and, go higher and get, better jobs, of course. You could also, as he's proposed, a 1% Wall Street speculation tax. And the reason why you would have a 1% Wall Street speculation tax is because Wall Street doesn't create anything. They just have these loans and they're just writing shit. And they're not actually creating any real items. It's just money circulating. And so, these stock transactions over and over again, they don't really create anything. And I believe it's like the vast majority of stocks are owned by the top 10%. And I'm sure that the vast majority is within the 1% because, if you know anything about the stock market, you can't really make any money in the stock market unless you have a real significant amount to invest, which you just don't have. It takes way too much money to do that. And then he goes, to talk about the tweet that was sent out or whatever, talking about, the wealth concentration. Yeah, dude, like the wealth concentration in too little hands is extremely a big problem. Income inequality is a horrible thing for society because it destroys the social cohesion as well as, if people start to get pissed off, so when you see, and there are always those new numbers that come out where it's like the top 8 people own like the same as own as much as the bottom half of the country. And it's like, Jesus Christ, don't you think that's too much money? In fact, I think that no one should be allowed to have $1 billion in wealth. I think we should have taxes in place where after $1 billion, you're 100% taxed. And that has to go with wealth because obviously people aren't making, people don't have $1 billion in cash most of the time. It's usually because they've got, whether it be stocks or whatever, they shouldn't be able to have over $1 billion because how many millions are in $1 billion? 1,000 millions. You could have $800 million in wealth and still not have $1 billion. Nobody should be allowed to have that much money because it's not healthy for our society. And, and you'll hear conservatives make the dumb argument that, that really stupid argument of, oh, it's not a zero-sum game. Doofus, it actually is a zero-sum game. Why is that? Because, like Jeff Bezos, for example, it's a zero-sum game for his employees because who's making the money in that situation? The employees or him? Him. And so when you talk about where does that money go that he's making, you're talking about it's going to him instead of the workers when it should be going to the workers. That is a zero-sum game. And life is a zero-sum game, all the time. So, and also, I've made the point that, Bernie Sanders is going to save the society because people are going to riot, people are going to revolt as automation comes through and people don't have work. And there are, conservatives who believe in the religion of conservatism, who obviously aren't going to want to help people without jobs. And people are going to revolt, man. They're going to come for you. That's why Andrew Yang, the technocrat who's trying to help out his buddies, that's why he wants to put in place UBI because he's trying to save them from being, revolted against.
But Bill de Blasio is still trying to play this class warfare game where he is pushing for taking away wealth from some and giving the wealth to others. Socialism is all fun and games until it's actually implemented. When it is implemented, like in Venezuela, there's no electricity. Caracas, Venezuela, is now in its fourth day of complete darkness. Refrigeration has failed. People are eating spoiled and rotten food. Socialism, working wherever it's tried. And don't give me Norway and Denmark, guys. Those are capitalist countries with some redistributionist programs stacked on top. If you're talking about socialism, you have to talk like Bill de Blasio, which means nationalization of industry and removal of money from those who make business to those who don't. Well, one of the lead proponents of this nonsense is, of course, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who says the same dumb stuff as Bernie Sanders, but is younger and more attractive. And
then, of course, we get the absolute bomb dropped on us. What is that, you may ask? Venezuela. We got the Venezuela hit that truly got us there. But again, as per usual, Venezuela is not an apt comparison of what Bernie or AOC is proposing. Bernie and AOC are not socialists; they're social democrats. As I explained earlier already, I already explained this. Social democracy is not even close to the same as socialism. In fact, it's very, very far off. Social democracy is, having capitalism with a welfare state, which is, what Ben Shapiro there said. He goes, well, don't bring up Denmark and these other countries. They're not socialists. They're capitalist nations. It's like, yes, doofus, thank you for saying that. And this is what I meant earlier about it not being semantically sound, because you're talking about Bernie being a socialist when he's not a fucking socialist. That's why his examples he gives you are Denmark and Sweden, is because those countries are capitals with a welfare state, and that's what he believes in. So he's not even being, semantically sound here, and that's another pretty big problem there. But also, I want to mention that Venezuela, their core problem really started when Saudi Arabia, in conjunction with the U.S., and you can read about this, Saudi Arabia purposely lowered their oil prices because in doing so, they would tank the Venezuelan economy. And they did that in conjunction with the United States because it helps them out. And we also know about, I think there was video footage that the New York Times uncovered that it was the enemies of Maduro who I think it was rebels putting on fire the aid that was being sent into to Venezuela, which they had previously blamed on Nicolas Maduro for burning. So that's not even an apt comparison in any way, shape, or form, because they've been meddled in this entire time, and they haven't even really been able to do their own thing without the United States trying to take their oil now, which they've said wide in the open, by the way. That's not a conspiracy. They've literally said it out. We saw John Bolton say it, by himself. He's the one who said that. So I'm not making it up. John Bolton said that himself. So anyways, Venezuela is not even a good comparison even at that, because it's dog, they're not, we are meddling in their nation. What we purposely had Saudi Arabia lower their oil prices to tank their economy. So we fucked their shit up, and then we go, look at how bad this country is, and therefore this economic system is horrible. And then you compare it to Bernie Sanders, who's not even a Venezuelan socialist or whatever you want to say. But the Venezuela meme lives on.